Hi friends, today I thought we could have a little stroll along the Avenue of Enlightenment. So at the end of the street there, about 200 meters away, there's a train station, and then the street itself has got trams. You see there the tram lines, buses of course, 2 metro stations, and also further on trolley bus lines as well. The very first thing we see there is a statue of the Georgian writer Shota Rustaveli. Of course, Russia and Georgia have a long-term friendship going over many centuries, I guess. And during the USSR, at one point, I mean, the Georgians were actually ruling Russia. It seems quite a pleasant street to have a stroll down. It's a long street, it goes on about 8 kilometers. It's a little bit noisy at times with the trams ricketing along. So the street was built up in the early 70s, so should be plenty of architecture from the 70s, 80s and also the 90s. I don't think there's that much modern stuff, but there are 1 or 2 examples we'll see. So yeah, I knew this would be a Soviet-built street just by when I saw the name of it, because you know, the Soviet citizen was supposed to be enlightened in matters of science and culture and politics, etc. That's one of the 2 metro stations on the street. Some of you may have seen it before if you tuned into the stroll I had along this street, which is Citizens Avenue, a couple of months ago now. So that goes up there, and then the street we're walking along today goes all the way down there. There tends to be large residential blocks by metro stations, and you can see here quite a long one there, and this one opposite as well, which is quite imposing actually. And the brick building for a change instead of the concrete slabs. Perhaps it was a later one. Now you wouldn't think it made much difference, but actually the brick buildings are seen as being kind of more prestigious than the panelled ones. It's thought that they keep the flats hotter in the winter time. I mean, I don't know if that's quite true or not. I mean, it doesn't really make any difference in Russia anyway, because you know the flats are so hot with all the state-controlled heating pouring out. The room's like a sauna anyway, so it doesn't really matter, I guess, whether it's bricks or concrete. That block there's an interesting shade, isn't it? Don't see too many blocks of that colour. So that yellow scientific building is a bit like a smaller, more modest version of the larger one we caught a glimpse of by the metro station a minute ago. And you see a brand new block behind it as well. Behind me used to be a Soviet cinema, but they knocked it down a decade ago and then built the shopping centre instead. They've kept the name, at least, Prometheus, and the statue that was outside they've moved to a park further along. You might see it later on. So you can see from here that, you know, the street has kept a lot of its original character, mostly still the Soviet blocks. I guess to the untrained eye all these blocks kind of just look the same, but actually they're different. As I mentioned before, the Soviet town planners tried to make the streets nice, especially the long boulevards, and you see they've tried to maintain, you know, the pleasant aesthetics of the street. Obviously the big housing blocks can be dull, you know, as everyone knows, anywhere in the world. So I think now the summers is a good time to see them because they're sort of brightened up with all the green spaces around the trees, the grass and the flowers and all of that. So it kind of provides quite a cool contrast actually, and they don't look so bad, right? The same can be said for all the streets going off the boulevard as well. There's a rather large park here, or square, right on the road. And it's here where you can find that statue I mentioned earlier that used to be outside the destroyed cinema. The development of this area in the 1970s coincided with the golden generation of Soviet cinema, and that could explain why there's another cinema behind me. Now this one is still standing, although it's been heavily renovated. This building I'm walking alongside is kind of cool. I think it's the dormitory actually for the students of the medical college. There are one or two new blocks on the street. I mean, they look kind of out of place on the 1970s Soviet street. In parts you've got this strip of greenery separating the path and the main road, so it doesn't actually seem that noisy, especially when the trams aren't coming along. You've got a real red brick building here, and it's kind of interesting that all the buildings on this street, I don't know about all of them, but an awful lot of them do seem to be made of brick instead of the old concrete slabs. That's another example. Another thing, the path is perfectly wide enough. It's not like in some streets where you've got a narrow path and you're bumping into people. Here you just kind of got a spacious feel to it. Another feature of this block is just how high the second floors are. You know, apart from the Stalin, because normally the first floors didn't have such high ceilings, but this one has, which is kind of unusual. Just come across yet another large green square. There's one of the trolley buses that comes on the second half of the street. This Avenue of Enlightenment does seem a particularly good example of Soviet town planning. Really, you don't have to suspend your mind that much to imagine that you're in the 1970s USSR. Actually, speaking of old school, look at that advertisement to try and get people to do more useful professions than just blogging and other things like that. The street's mainly made up of the longer style blocks, but you've got some of the taller, narrower ones as well. Behind me is the other metro station on the street, and this one actually takes the name of the street. So the street's almost up. It goes a little bit further on, but I think that'll do for today. Okay then, so I hope you're feeling in some way slightly more enlightened after that, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.